Hello, random YouTube people. You want to know how you can save hundreds of dollars by installing your water heater by yourself? Follow these simple steps. Subscribe. We have a water sensor alarm that went off at about 8 p.m. last night, and I came down to find this at the water heater. It is just leaking like a faucet. Unfortunately, this tank has failed and it needs to be replaced. Now I know what you might be thinking. The hot water heater is one of the major appliances in your home, and it can be quite intimidating when you look at it to see, can I do this by myself? And trust me, if I can do it, so can you. Before you start to get installed, it's good to know what kind of tank you have. On the side of your hot water heater, there will be some information. Mine is natural gas. You can see mine's a 50 gallon. And to the top of the tank, it's about 57 inches tall. Do your research and find a comparable model that is in your price range. Then go purchase your hot water heater. I got mine from Home Depot. I'll share a link in the description on this exact model that I purchased. Here are a set of tools you will need. A hex socket adapter, a flathead screwdriver, a set of crescent wrenches, a pipe wrench, some pipe dope and Teflon tape, and some soapy water. Step 1 of the uninstallation process is to turn everything off. Start by setting the water heater control panel to the off position. Locate the natural gas valve and turn it off. And shut off the incoming cold water valve. Step number 2 is to drain the tank. Start by opening the hot water on the nearest faucet. Next, grab a garden hose and attach it to the tank drain. Then, using a flathead screwdriver, open up the valve and let it drain. If you do not have a floor drain, you may need to empty this out into 5-gallon buckets. Once your water heater is empty, go ahead and shut off the tank drain valve and disconnect your hose. The next step is to disconnect the hot and cold water connections. Before you do this, you will need to determine what kind of connections you have. I have copper pipes that connect to my water heater, and the copper pipes connect to what's called PEX pipes. I also have what's called an expansion tank. Expansion tanks are not required in all areas. Check your codes. To give myself a little more room to work, I'm going to first disconnect the vent hood. To get those hood screws off, I'm using a 1/4 inch hex bolt adapter here on my screwdriver. And I'm going to start to loosen these. You can also put that adapter into a automatic drill, but just for space sake, I'm going to use this, and I'll get those all off. Just taking this topmost piece off to give myself a little more room to work. And on the cold water line, there's an expansion tank, which some states require an expansion tank. You might want to check your zoning. But I noticed if I undo it here, then the weight of this copper pipe and the expansion tank are going to pull down on this PEX pipe right here. And the only thing that it has to rest on is this gas line right here. And I didn't want to cause any issues with the gas line. So I thought about grabbing a piece of wood and putting it on the lip of the joist from here to here so that it sits on that instead of sitting on the gas line. Let's see how it goes. There we are. I just grabbed a piece of scrap wood from a previous project and I put it between the joist, and so now the weight of the line should rest right there. So let's start unhooking these connections. To undo the connections, I'll be using a large crescent wrench and a pipe wrench and what's known as elbow grease. My cold water line was not wanting to come undone, so I sprayed some WD-40 to help loosen it up. Well, you can see both the cold and the hot water lines are disconnected from the water heater, but this really heavy expansion tank, like I said, is kind of just dangling there. I'm going to try to move that piece of wood over to the corner so we're not stressing this line too much. You can see I moved that piece of wood forward so it's near the joint there, but it is flexing this line, but it's just dangling here now. And I'm just going to try to get this out of here as quick as possible and get it rehooked up. So the next step in this process is to undo the gas line here. Previously, I tried to remove the water heater from around the gas line, but I was unsuccessful. Every situation is different. You can see in my house, the gas line is protruding into the area where the water heater is, in order to actually get the water heater out, I need to disassemble this gas line at the valve in order to give myself enough room. We are first going to disconnect the gas from the controller. So there's two pieces. This is the gas hose itself, and it's a flexible hose. And it comes to this little nipple piece where it's male to male on both sides. So we're probably going to need to reuse this. So I'm going to try to spin it off of the controller and off the line here. And then when we put this all back together, we're going to use some what's called pipe dope. You can see there's already some pipe dope on here. To get this off of the controller, I've got a smaller wrench. All right. Dude! Yep, I just fell down on my bum trying to loosen this, but I got it undone. So I'm going to spin that gas line off. And remember, we're going to have to check for leaks when we put this all back together. But since I turned off the gas, we shouldn't be smelling any gas. There we go. Here, let's check the smell. Ooh, yeah, you can smell some residual gas in there, but I don't smell any active gas coming through. But we're gonna have to check all of these connections when we put it back together to make sure that it's airtight and gas leak free. So let's try to get this one off. It's easier if you have use of two hands, so I did get that undone with my wrench, and we're going to save this nipple piece for later. A nipple piece is what this is called, two male ends like that. Using a smaller crescent wrench and a pipe wrench, I undid the gas line at the valve. With the gas line out of the way, we're going to move on to step 5, which is clearing a path. You may find that there are other things in your path that you need to move out of the way in order to get your water heater out. In my case, it's my water softener. I had previously removed the water softener so I could get better shots for the video for the other steps. But in step 5, we're clearing a path, moving the water softener. You may or may not need to do this, but it's just a good thing to keep in mind. Now I know what you're thinking. Where is the brine tank for my water softener? Be sure to check out this video to see how I move the brine tank into the garage. I have my water softener disassembled here, and I've taken it out of the way and just stored it over here. With a path cleared, we're going to move on to step 6, which I'm going to call prep for removal. In this step, we are going to remove the earthquake straps from around the tank itself. We're also going to remove the temperature and pressure relief valve drain pipe. We are going to keep this pipe as new water heaters do not come with them. Finally comes step 7, remove the water heater. Now these aren't the lightest of things. If you have pipes on the floor like I do, or you need to carry it up the stairs like I do, you might want to enlist the help of a friend or a neighbor like I did to carry it up and get it out of there. Now comes the time to install the new water heater, but first we're going to install a drip pan. This is something I wish I had on the old water heater, so I'm going to make it its own new step, step 8, add a drip pan. Now that the old water heater is out of the way, we're just going to basically reverse the process. This time I bought a drip pan, and it's got a little nozzle here on the edge. This is a 1-inch, so if the water fills up, it's going to start coming out here. I'll eventually get a pipe that goes down to the drain in the floor, just like this soft water here. But for now, I'm going to direct the water towards the drain. This is a 24-inch pan, and it barely fits. Kind of goes up against the HVAC system, but you can bend these, and I might bend that a little bit more so that they're not coming into contact with each other and one doesn't ruin the other. But it does fit a 24-inch pan. The bottom of the new water heater is 20.5 inches. So we're gonna have about roughly a little less than 2 inches on each, or all the way around, for the water to drain into this pan nice. So we don't get it all on the floor like it was before. Step 9 is install the new water heater. Basically reverse the process that you did to uninstall it. Start by getting it out of the box. Cut along the dotted line with a box cutter or a razor knife. Now take off the box. And here it is, our brand new water heater. Looks pretty. It does sit a little bit higher, but shouldn't be a big deal really. In the box is the new hood piece. I'm just gonna set that to the side for now. Before I get it back there in the hole, That's what she said. I'm going to wrap these with Teflon tape. And when you're looking down at it, you're going to want to go in a clockwise direction so that when you're tightening the connections, that it tightens the Teflon tape onto the connection instead of trying to spin it back off. There we are, cold, all Teflon taped up, and the hot water side as well. Just went around a couple of times. Some people say 3 times, some people say 6. I just did about 6 myself. And then once it's back in there, I'm going to put some pipe dope around these right before I install those connections to make it extra watertight. Also, I see that it comes out hooked or onto pilot. I'm going to go ahead and turn that to the off position there before I do anything. I've moved the water heater as close as I can to the drip pan that it's going to sit in. I'm going to now enlist the help of my neighbor to lift this up into the pan. I'm not going to be able to do that all by myself. Now that I got my neighbor to help me push it back into the corner and inside the pan, I'm going to reverse the process. Earthquake straps first. Earthquake straps, seismic straps, tighten down. Now I've moved the water heater over a little bit to this left side of the pan because I wanted a little extra space for the pressure relief valve tube to come down and go into the pan instead of outside of the pan. So next step would be to connect the hot and the cold water lines again. You can see that on these lines, the hot water, for example, since the unit sits a little higher, if I come up, you can see that since my system has these flex pipes on the other side, it's not a big deal that it's a little bit taller. If you had a hard piped line, you might have to cut your pipe a little shorter and redo your fittings if your tank set a little higher. Measure your tank first before you go buy one, but in my case, it doesn't really matter. Now, before I start tightening this, I'm going to put on a layer of what's called pipe dope, and here it is. So this one is a pipe thread sealant. So you can also see on the back that this says that it is a rector seal. And so this is for use with gas lines, natural gas, as well as petroleum, things like that. So it's going to work great for when I do my gas line, but it should also work for any kinds of pipes, really, plastic, metal. You can see on the front side, it says it's for plastics and metal pipes. So we are good for both of these. I'm just going to put a little layer of it on here to make sure that the seal is extra good. So I'm just going to take my pipe dope and just go around the threads like this. Just get a nice little coat. And of course I'm going to do this not one-handed. I was just showing you what I'm going to do. Now lifting the hot water line up and onto the threads. And I'm going to start tightening it by hand at first. But I'm going to need my pipe wrench to hold this one in place so it doesn't spin while I spin this nut. Got both the lines on the little nipples and I'm just tightening it down. You can see I'm holding on to the little T-union piece or joint because when I was on the pipe, I'm starting to kind of scratch it up, so I didn't want to damage the pipe, so I'm holding on here to the joint. Just put the top hood piece on, and now just a matter of reconnecting the other parts of the downspout for the flue. Now comes the reassembly of the hood piece. The old hood piece is still stuck in mine, so I'm going to pry it off with a screwdriver and put it onto the new hood piece and reassemble it and tighten all the screws. I haven't done the gas yet, but I'm just going to turn on the water just to see if I have some leaks first. So I'm just turning it on, checking for leaks. I don't see any leaks here. And so far I don't see any leaking here, so that's great. But for now I'm going to turn the water back off so that I can put the gas line on. Next step is to reassemble this gas line. I'm going to clean this off and put some pipe dope on there and tighten it up and check for leaks. You can see some pipe dope over here. It doesn't look like they used any Teflon tape on these lines, so I'm just gonna really lather this stuff up with pipe dope and hope that I don't have any leaks. I've pipe doped it up, and now I'm gonna start spinning it into the valve right here. If you'll remember, we removed the nipple piece off the controller. We are going to reuse it, going to clean off the old pipe dope and put new pipe dope on, and reassemble it into the controller, starting with the controller piece first. Remove the piece of safety tape and start inserting your nipple into the controller. Remember to not over-tighten this, because you'll ruin the threads or break your controller. Now pipe dope on the other side. Next, connect the gas line to the other end of the nipple. Tighten it down and check for leaks. I'm going to turn the valve on, and then I'm going to spray the new connections and pretty much all connections down the line with some soapy water. And if it bubbles, that means that we have a leak. We can also do a smell test as well. So let's go ahead and turn this gas line on and cross our fingers. Certainly don't hear anything. Let's go ahead and give it a smell. Don't smell anything, just smelling metal. Let's get down here. Yep, I don't smell anything, so let's give it a spray from our soapy water. Don't want to do too much, but just enough to just kind of see if there's a leak. You would see some bubbling going on. I don't see anything. Let's go ahead and spray to the connections down here. Don't immediately see any kind of bubbling going on. This is just a gather of what I just sprayed on there. But I don't see any actual bubbling. So I believe we are good, folks. Now we come to our last step, which I'm going to call turning everything back on. Start by making sure the controller is off. Do not try to light the pilot before the tank is full of water. If you do, you'll ruin your tank and who knows what else kind of problems. Go ahead and turn on the cold water and make sure you check for leaks again. Right after you turn on the cold water, go to the furthest away faucet and turn on the hot water. Once the hot water heater is full of water and the line is pressurized, you'll see water start to come out of the hot water line. At this point, I would recommend you go open all the other hot water lines and make sure all the air is flushed out of those as well. Make sure that you don't see any leaking from your hot water line now that it's all pressurized. After the water heater is full of water and no leaks are found, we can go ahead and turn on the pilot light. Before we do that, let's go ahead and check the gas line one more time for any smells of gas or leaks of any kind. I just smell soapy water at the moment. Let's put on here. I don't smell anything that smells like a gas. It just smells like the pipe dope. Then the next part comes turning it on. Every water heater tank should have instructions on how to light right here on the tank itself. So read these instructions carefully and follow them for your specific hot water tank. You'll even find some instructions on the controller itself. Press and hold the knob in the pilot position. Press the igniter button until the pilot lights. Release the knob when the light starts blinking. Now I found out that if you read the directions that this can take up to 90 seconds. So put the controller in pilot and press the ignition button several times until you start seeing the light flash blue. You guys hear that rumble? I just turned it to hot. The pilot light status is blinking blue, which means that it's a normal operation. You can see the pilot light on there. Now it's really roaring. It means it's heating the water. This will come back, well maybe not back down here, but we'll test the water in probably a half hour to an hour to see if it's gotten warm. While we're waiting for it to heat up the water, the last part is to put in the overflow pipe that we took off the other water heater. We're going to make sure that it sits inside the drain pan that we put in. And there it is. You'll just have to trust me, I've got hot water running now. That was about 40-45 minutes or so. I mean, it's not scalding hot by any means, but it's warm. I'd take a shower in that. Probably not a bath, but it'll get warmer. Well, I was just upstairs and I had a nice hot shower. Thought I'd come down and check these lines since the hot water is running through and I don't see any leaking. Now that everything's working, the last thing for me to do is just to put my soft water back on the line. Now you just replaced your water heater. You don't want to have to do it again. They're not the cheapest appliances. So how can you keep it running great? There's a couple things you can do. The first thing is to drain your tank every 6 months. You're going to do the same thing, turn the pilot light to off, and then twist the spigot on the water heater to drain the water down to your drain in the floor. And you're going to drain the entire tank. And then you can fill it back up, and yes, you're going to have to relight the pilot light. But if you do that every 6 months, it should get the sediment buildup in your tank and flush it out. That's one way to keep your tank from early deterioration on the inside. Another thing you're going to want to do is to replace the anode rod that sits inside the tank. The anode rod is a piece of metal that kind of sacrifices itself, so it will deteriorate without it eating your water tank itself. And you should replace the anode rod every 3 to 5 years. Probably to be safer, 3 years is the best. And let me show you where that anode rod is on the top of the water heater. Now they don't put it in a nice, easy, convenient place. We're going to pretend that my basement is finished and that's a solid wall there. The anode rod sits back here. To get that out, you're going to need a 1 1/16 socket. And this is a deep well socket that I have to replace the anode rod in my trailer water heater. And that's just going to stuff down the hole like this. And of course, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, you'll be able to pull that anode rod out and then put the new one back in and tighten it up. Following these simple maintenance steps will prolong the life of your water heater and keep your water heater producing warm water for many years to come. Because let's be honest, you don't want to have to replace this thing every other year. It is a pain in the butt, but it's easy to do with these simple steps. Thanks for watching. And that, random YouTube people, is how you can save hundreds of dollars on installing your water heater by yourself. Subscribe.